Ownership in a company is calculated, and companies are not run on emotions, they are run according to CAMA. So if you're ready to run your company the right way, this is for you. This is day 4 of the 30 days of Know Your CAMA challenge. And today we're looking at sections 78 to 104. Let's start right away. Section 78 talks about foreign companies who, though running a company outside the country, are have intention to carry on business in Nigeria. Section 78 just says that they shall take steps to obtain necessary incorporation as a separate entity in Nigeria. However, remember that I told you on day 1 that most times when general rules are created in CAMA, there is always an exception. There is most times, not always, an exception. So for this particular section, we actually have an exception. Section 78 sub 3. An application for such exemption is in writing done to the office of the minister. There are criteria that letter should meet, right? So we move on to annual reports. Even though these companies are exempted, these foreign companies, they shall still deliver to the CAC in every calendar year a report in the form prescribed by the CAC. So that's like their own annual reports. We move on to the next, which talks about promoters, and promoters are basically been explained in section 85. So if you were engaged not in professional capacity in the formation of a company, you are deemed a promoter, and there are duties and liabilities of that promoter. I need to mention that Section 86 says that such promoters stand in a fiduciary relationship. And what that necessarily means is that you have to act in good faith. You owe a duty of care and a duty to act in good faith while you're carrying on any transactions. We move on to the next, which is chapter 5, and talks about acts on behalf by or on behalf of the company in exercise of company's powers. We move on to chapter 5 of this part A, which talks about the acts by and on behalf of the company in exercise of the company's powers. Remember that we talked about, I think it was on day 2, when we talked about the effect of registration, that the company becomes a corporate body, more like an entity on its own that can sue and be sued on property. However, the company section 87 says that the company shall act through its, because of course it's an artificial person, so it has to act through people, through the hands, through the legs, through the mind of people. So section 87 goes ahead to say that the company shall act through its members in general meeting or its board of directors or through officers or agents appointed by or under authority derived from the members in general meeting or the board of directors. It's very important to know that if you are acting under authority, you have derived it from the members or the board of directors. Section 87, sub 3 then says that except as otherwise provided in the company's article, the business of the company shall be managed by the board of directors who may exercise all such powers of the company as are not by this act or the articles required to be exercised by the members in a general meeting. However, just also be aware that the members can delegate some of these powers, to the directors. Section 88 also is very interesting. It says that the board of directors may exercise its powers through committees consisting of such members of the board of the board of directors as they think fit, or from time to time appoint one or more of its members to the office of the managing director and may delegate all or any of its powers to such managing director. We move on to the next, which talks about the liability for acts of the company. And this is very interesting. Section 89 says that any acts of the members in general meeting and the board of directors or a managing director while carrying on in the usual business of the company shall be treated as the acts of the company itself, and the company is criminally and civilly liable to the same extent as if it were a natural person. I had to stress that it has to be done in the usual way of business. So if it is out of the usual way of business, or it is out of the delegated powers conferred by the members, or powers conferred by the articles of association, or powers that have been conferred by CAMA, then such act is not the usual way of business, and such director would personally bear any liabilities that arise from those acts. Okay, we move on to the next, and which is sections 90, but we've already briefly explained sections 90. So we'll just move on to subsection 2 that says that the authority, so it just basically says that an officer or agent may actually act prior to obtaining such approval. However, the board or the members must actually approve these actions that they've taken, and then it then becomes like the act of the company. Nothing in this section shall actually derogate, that's subsection section 90 subsection 3 actually gives a proviso. Section 90 subsection 3 actually points that nothing in this sections 90 sub 3 actually mentions, worthy of note, that nothing in this act actually reduces the vicarious liability of the company for the acts of its servants or employees, I would like to call them, while acting within the scope of their employment. So if anybody is acting within the scope of their employment, the company would actually be vicariously liable. Another section actually worthy of note today is sections 93. Section 93 actually just gives a presumption of regularity, and it just simply explains that if you're any person dealing with any agent or officer of a company is free to presume that such person is complying with the provisions of the memorandum and articles and within the powers, of course, of the memorandum and article of association. Subsection section 93 sub B goes ahead to say that any person that is prescribed in the particulars filed with the commission in accordance with sections 36 sub 4, that is mentioned in the MEMAT, sections um, 319, that is the register of the directors, and sections 337, that's the register of the secretary. So any of these named person, if someone acts with them, it is presumed that they've acted with the company legally. And we also have to note that section 94 says that even if such persons acted by fraud or forgery of any documents or any signatures, it is still presumed that they were acting within the powers of the company, and the company would still be liable, except where such person is aware that this officer or agent is actually acting fraudulently or has obtained any signatures or approvals by forgery, and they go ahead with them, then the company would not be liable for such acts. We move on to the next, which talks about companies contract. So basically section 95 just explains that the way you would enter into a contract with a person, a natural person, you can actually enter into a contract with a company. Sections 98 and 99. Okay, let's start with 98 that talks about the common seal. So, common seal of the company is no longer compulsory. So, it says that the company may actually have a common seal, but they do not need one. And where a company has a common seal, the design and use shall be regulated by the company's article of association, and it shall have its name engraved in legible characters on the seal. Then we talk about the official seal for use abroad. So where a company whose objects require and comprise the transaction of business in a foreign country, a company can actually have its seal in that foreign country. Authentication and service of documents, and this is contained in sections 101 to 104. So section 101 says that where a document requires authentication by a company, it can actually be done by the director, secretary, or any authorized officer. Section 101 also states that electronic signature is actually allowed. Right, if it is done through electronic signature, it is deemed to satisfy the requirements of signing under this section. We go ahead to the execution of deeds by a company. So where a company is actually supposed to execute a deed, can actually execute that deed without the common seal, right? And that can be done by the signature on behalf of the company by a director of the company and a secretary, by two directors, or by at least a director of the company in the presence of one witness who shall attest to the signature. Then the last for today is sections 104, service of documents on companies. And this is very important. A, a court process shall be served on a company in the manner provided by the rules of court, and any other documents may be served on the company by leaving it at or by sending it by post to the registered office or head office of the company. So if you see this document, do not say you were not served. You were served. Section 104 of CAMA says that these documents can actually be sent to you or left at your registered address. So that's all we can take for day 4. It's getting interesting in here. We still have 26 more days to go. I'll see you on day 5.